Assyrian the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. I will send him against a hypocritical nation. Against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take the spoil, to take the prey, to tread them down like the mire of the streets. But he doesn't mean it, neither does his heart think so, but it's in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. Are not my princes altogether kings? Is not Calno, as Karshemesh is not Hamath.
Hello, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. I'm having a mild bit of technical difficulty here. Let's see if we can just do that one more time. There we go. Okay, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Ow! Hit myself with the microphone. Just normal. All right. All right. We come to chapter 10, which is really connected to chapter 9, as I said at the end last time. Chapter 10, the first few verses really do belong more with chapter 9, in my opinion, if we're going to assign chapters at all. Because there's that series of woes. Woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees. Woe to them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, till wine inflame them. Was there any other woes? Woe unto them. Actually, decree unrighteous decrees. Isn't that the one we're about to do? Yeah. Actually, it's woe to them. What is it? Woe to them that build house to house, that lay field to field, till there be no place, that they may be placed alone. Woe to them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink. Woe to them that are mighty to drink wine. Woe to them that are... What was another one? There was one about... rise up early in the morning to drink strong drink, to those who are mighty to drink wine. Those who... what was the other one? One in particular I wanted to quote, though. I guess a lot of this... It's because it's part... that chapter... Am I thinking of something happened back in chapter 5? Am I that far off, yeah? Woe to them that call evil good, good evil. Woe to them that are wise in their own eyes. Woe to them that are mighty to drink wine. And it's really the same kind of thing. Isaiah has a lot of woes for those who do the things that God is not pleased with. So woe to those in 10 verse 1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness, which they have prescribed, to turn away the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. What will you do in the day of visitation, and in the desolation which shall come from far? To whom will you flee for help? And where will you leave your glory? Without me they shall bow down under the prisoners, and they shall fall under the slain. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. So again, we have that phrase repeated now. Again, this is I concluded the last chapter. And there was a place earlier in the chapter where it was same sentiment. For all the things that have happened, for all the things that have, the punishments, the woes, yet that is not enough to satisfy the anger of God concerning this thing. Because there's more sin. Woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees. He was making bad law. Making unrighteous, unfair laws. And they write grievousness. The laws are, laws are supposed to be things that help society, but instead they're things that grieve people very often. And of course, the ones who bear the brunt of the pain are the poor and the needy. Exemplified here by the widows and the fatherless. Widows and orphans, widows and orphans. Widows and orphans are the ones who are always getting the bad treatment because in society, especially in more traditional societies, they are the most helpless. Because a child obviously can't take care of itself. And a woman, especially if she is, as Paul said, a woman indeed, a widow indeed, like a young widow with children, obviously is in extremely dire circumstances, especially in more traditional societies. Even in our society, single mothers are in greater peril than they realize. So a lot of times I guess they realize it. You know, as much as people like to boast and talk about, oh, I'm on my own, I don't need no help from nobody. Oh, we can all make it on our own, but it sure is a lot easier to make it with somebody else. So that's why people choose companionship over loneliness for the most part. But widows often would not be, especially a widow with children, you know, in traditional societies, who wants to take care of that child? Who wants to take care of that woman? Maybe he'd rather have his own wife with his own child. Well, it falls to the greater society to look after the people who on an individual basis fall through the cracks. And oftentimes the laws themselves are against, you know, and the laws often hurt the people it hurts the people the most that can very least afford to be hurt. You know, like they raise the vehicle in Illinois, they raise the vehicle registration fees, right? But I mean, I'll tell you what, poor people are more likely to have multiple cars that don't work. I know because that's how I live. But I mean, they're less likely to have a new car they take to the mechanic and is always in operation. So oftentimes I'd like to keep 3 or 4 cars around because they're not all reliable. Also, I'd like to spread the mileage around. Well, for a poor person, while that may make more sense as far as cars go, when it comes to the fact that the law requires us to buy insurance and plates, to even have a car running, even if you have no payments, you know, it's like just the licensing fees and all that can be burdensome, especially to poor people. You can think of the licensing fee was like $100, and now it's almost $200 per car. I'll tell you what, I've never been a wealthy person, that's for sure. I've always felt well off, but I mean, I lived in what's technically called poverty for my entire adult life. Well, not my entire adult life. Forever since I had a certain number of children, they dragged me down into poverty because that's how the scale works. The more children you have, the more the income they require before they say, yeah, that's poverty, right? That $100 was a lot at times. You know, when you live paycheck to paycheck, or you live from job to job, having something like that popping up is always a pain, because it's like it's bad enough when you're barely able to keep up with regular bills, then you have things inserted. Oh, here, now it's time for this, now it's time for that. Now it's time for the license plate sticker renewal. Except now instead of $100, it's $200 a car. So you're still gonna run 2 or 3 cars this year? If you have 3 cars, that goes from, 3 cars doesn't necessarily mean they're all new. I own like 12 cars, but but 3 of them work. And of those 3, 1 is roadworthy at the moment. The point is, they'll raise, and I'm not just complaining about my situation. When they raise those kind of use fees, or like cigarette taxes. I don't smoke cigarettes, but I've seen the prices. $10 a pack or whatever for some of these. It's like, how can people... But they do. They do. But the thing is, it's like, it's got to affect, a poor person addicted to cigarettes is going to be a lot more hurt than a rich guy. Rich people can afford to smoke. But poor people can't, but they do anyways. In fact, they're more likely to smoke. And they pay, so they're paying all the taxes on those things. They're paying all the user fees. And, there's some justice to people paying for what they use. I got no problem with that. But so often the laws are not righteous. They're not helpful. It's like welfare laws. Like in the 60s, they passed all these Great Society programs that were supposed to help lift everybody out of poverty. And it didn't work. In fact, we have more poverty now than we did then, from what I understand. Right? Because it fostered dependence and all this other stuff. And it didn't actually help. That's what annoys me about government programs, is that people don't take responsibility for them. They don't take responsibility for the bad results that they've gotten. They say, we're going to help everybody, we're going to do this, and then they don't help everyone. In fact, since they enacted the Great Society, I don't know if this is correlation or causation, meaning if it's just the fact that they're happening at the same time, because there's a lot happening between 1960 and now. A lot more happened than welfare, and to blame welfare primarily and only for the problems of the inner city is, I think, a bit much. But it's clear that it has not helped lift people out of poverty. It's only, perpetuated the problem. And not, according to Jesus, you're always going to have the poor with you. There's always going to be poverty. And it's funny because we have a poverty standard in America that doesn't really make a lot, it doesn't look at your actual possessions. It only looks at your income. You know what I mean? Like if I had a $1 million trust fund and no income, I'd technically be living in poverty, and that makes no sense. All right. To turn away, okay. And so laws are passed often to protect the powerful. Like they'll pass a law. Well, do I have anything more to say about that welfare issue? Well, just this, that the results we get from our programs should be important. That even if they intended well, I know they didn't intend that welfare and the Great Society programs to hurt people, especially not minorities, right? Wasn't supposed to hurt them. Wasn't supposed to destroy their family, but it did. And they've got to take ownership of the consequences of their actions. I mean, it's like, this is not even done out of malice. It's done out of good intentions, but it hurts. And the thing is, what are they going to do? Just take it away now? Just take away the welfare? That won't work. Well, it might work, but it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. You're going to have riots. They created a huge mess, and it's like, how are you going to clean it up? I don't even know. I don't even have an idea. How do you stop doing that? And once you make people dependent, how do you get them independent again? I mean, you have to actually make a concerted effort. You can't just take it away. Unless you want a lot of trouble. But some laws are actually crafted in such a way as to screw you, the common man. There's laws enacted at the behest of corporations to protect the corporations. There's laws made at the behest of certain industries to protect those industries. A lot of laws about what you have to do with employees and stuff are just meant to keep competitors out. A lot of regulation is that way. Big companies come to the government and they lobby them and they say, "Hey, we want a regulation on our industry." It's like, why do you want that? Why do they want this regulation on their industry? Why do they want that? Well, because more cash-strapped upstarts can't afford what the established big businesses can do as far as infrastructure, as far as if they say, well, if you're going to run this store, you're going to have this kind of particular special sprinkler system installed, let's say. And they want to make it a law, even though the other systems that were available are perfectly adequate. No, they want a new safety, high standard regulation, and they say this is all for safety. This is all for but instead, what it does is it means only the big corporations can do business in that industry, and no little player can make it in because the cost of entry is too great. It costs too much money to start up in that business, so you better look elsewhere. And that's one of the ways in which people are, but this kind of thing happens. They pass laws that are not for the good of everyone, but for the good of the few. They're for the good of the rich and powerful, the well-connected. They're not for the good of the average person, certainly not for the least person in our society, the people who matter the least as far as to the powerful, the people with the least power, the least wealth. And in fact, it seems that, they go about, I mean, if you think about it, think about all the money they spent in the pandemic. It's like, how much of that money just went right back to the richest people? Everyone got their money and then they went and spent it on Amazon, Walmart, whatever. I felt very conscious about it. There were a couple of times, like over Christmas, when I was looking at stuff and how much stuff it was made in China. I didn't want to buy any more crap from over there. Lest we give them more of our dollars and empower them against us even more. We keep buying their stuff. It's troubling me. Okay, take away the right of the poor from my people. Widows may be the prey. The law, if you want, the best criminal enterprise you can get into is government, because then you can write the laws to fit what you want to do. If you want to steal from a particular industry, don't steal. Just write laws and legalize your stealing. Legalize the looting. That's what they do. They can write the laws that legalize what they do to make them, I mean, it's no surprise that all the Congress people end up being, not all, every single one, but I mean, for the most part, people go to Congress or the Senate or they become president. They go in middle class, they come out wealthy, rich, super rich often. I mean, if they weren't already, if you're a lot of the Republicans, they go in, they're rich already because they come from money or whatever. And what will you do in the day of visitation? There's a day when God is going to visit. There's a thing that comes up in prophecy. There's a day of visitation where God visits. It's not necessarily God himself visiting. Literally, in this case, it's alluding to the Assyrian when he comes. That's the day of the Lord's visitation. God is coming to Israel, and the Assyrian is the rod of his anger. And he is using him as an instrument to communicate to his people his displeasure. What will you do in the day of visitation? What are you going to do? You've passed all these grievous laws, and most of them do it thinking, we'll totally get away with this. We're not going to get caught. That's not a concern, because we are the law. Just like, I think back to January 6th, the Capitol riots. Before the Capitol riots came about, and that's kind of BS. I should call it the Capitol protests, because it wasn't a riot. Not really. I mean, there was a little rioting. But as far as the whole generalized thing, there was just a very small group of people. Not just a small group of people, but an isolated group of people. Meaning, most of the people who were there were nowhere near what went on, right? Well, they keep calling it an insurrection and all this stuff, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. It was just another protest, right? Just another protest. Not even armed, I mean, geez, if you're going to make that big of a deal out of it, we might as well have run a revolution or something like that. But they're trying to set an example. They want to let people know, like, hey, you try this again, you protest too hard, we'll throw the book at you. Interesting. I like the fact that they're doing that. It's interesting. What will you do in the day of visitation? Oh, the reason I brought that up. Why? Just to be current of any? No. I think it's the powerful's reaction to it that I was focused on. Yeah, that's true. They go on about this being an insurrection and all this stuff, and they make a big deal about it. And they definitely, they never want people to be able to when they write these laws, they expect that they're not going to be held to account for them. And if people do try to hold them account, they use their power to stifle them. I forgot why I was bringing up January 6th. It was something to do with something, but I can't quite nail it down. It comes back to me. Well, just the double standards, just how suddenly people come, if they're protesting from the wrong side of things, they treat you a lot differently. The idea of equal protection under the law is dead in America. It's dead. If you saw Derek Chauvin convicted, not on the evidence, but based on the will of the mob, and you know there's no justice. They've been complaining about no justice in America, and they think the way to fix it is by taking it away. You know what I mean? Like, we will bring justice to others by doing injustice to some. And that never works. You can never bring about justice through injustice. All you will bring about is greater pain. And we're in for greater pain. Just wait. When do they see what's coming? So the desolation which shall come from far. The Assyrians were a distant nation. They would come from far, and they would visit, and they would bring about God's wrath on Israel. So to whom will you flee for help? Well, they tried with the Egyptians, but the point is that there's no that all the help they would send for would be in vain. Oh, they would send for help, but you're going to send to the Egyptians? Really? The Egyptians? The Egyptians are like a reed that you put your hand on to rest, and it goes right through your hand, is what they said. What the Bible says about Egypt in that time, as far as being someone you can rely on. You know, you might as well lean on a needle. You know, why not just rest against a spear? I mean, the very act of relying on them is dangerous itself. And so to whom will you flee for help? You should flee to God, but they did not flee to him. And where will you leave your glory? And where will you leave your glory? What's that mean? Well, their glory is all the things they gloried in, their society, their idols, their temples, whatever they had that made them feel good. Our great civilization we've built, my great farm, my great workshop. I almost said factory, but there'd be no factory. My great workshop, my great, wine press, whatever, right? All that I've built, all that I've made, and when things are going normal, right? They expect people have an expectation. I'll save up, I'll put it away, and then I'll leave it to my children. But that doesn't always work out. Tell that to the generation of people who were killed in the Holocaust. What was there? Where will you leave your glory? In a pile outside the gas chamber is where they left their glory. And I'm not trying to be mean per se, but I'm just saying their valuables were stripped away and they were destroyed. And it's terrible. The Assyrians were also very vicious. It's like, where would they leave their glory? Broken on the side of the road. The Assyrians come through, they destroy everything. That which you treasured, the important things in your life, your little house, your little life, your little family, they're going to destroy and take away. Where will you leave your glory? Your glory is passing away. You're going to leave it to your children. Your children are going to be slaves. Your glory's, you can't, leave your glory also implies like you're going to stow it somewhere. Where will you leave your glory for safekeeping? It would come to my mind also in this. So, we'll be back for our glory later. No. Without me they shall bow down under the prisoners, and they shall fall under the slain. Interestingly, they shall bow down under the prisoners. They shall fall under the slain. What does that mean? And also, this is directed at those who decree unrighteous decrees. That's the lawmaking part of the people, the government, the state, the king, the counselors, the whatever, whoever has the power to enact legislation or rules, decrees in regards to whatever. I mean, there may be a minister of cows, for all I know, that decrees the price of milk or something. I don't know. Not a good idea. You should let the market determine that. But there are unrighteous decrees that get written and prescribed, and people got to follow them in spite of the fact that they're written unrighteously, because the power of the state is enforcing it. So, to take away the right of the poor from the poor, my people, the right they have to justice, visitation and desolation, whom from glory, bowing down under the prisoners. So, it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to be a prisoner. How would I bow down under the prisoner and fall under the slain? Or am I not just slain? Well, there's an idea of like the prisoners themselves. They shall bow down under the prisoners. The weight of the prisoners is being brought in here. Weight is put for numbers, because you don't weigh prisoners, you number them. But when there's a great number of things, there's also a great weight, right? And you could say there's like you could be bowed down under the weight of the butterflies, if there are enough of them. You bow down under the weight of the prisoners, fallen under the weight of the slain. And I think that implies, just since we're talking about leaders in this woe, they harbor in their minds the idea that they are still the leaders. We are the princes. We are the kings of Israel. We are the leaders. Even though we're being carried away into captivity, in their minds, they're still thinking there's something special about them. They still haven't let go of their sense of entitlement and their sense of they are, the in charge and all that, right? And the prisoners, the weight of the prisoners, the sheer fact and the knowledge of all they look around themselves. Like, imagine you're a king and you look around and you're in chains and naked and all your people are around you and naked and in chains. It's like, the reality of the situation bears down on you. The weight of the real situation is this: you are a failure. The real situation is you are being led into captivity. Look at all the prisoners. You're surrounded by how many prisoners can you count? Thousands. How many dead bodies? Thousands. They're going to fall from their position of power and from decreeing decrees and from writing laws. They're going to be taken down and away from that. I think that's what, the prisoners and the slain are going to overwhelm you. I guess the idea is that the prisoner, in fact, bow down under the prisoners is the idea of being overwhelmed by the prisoners. Obviously, no one's going to carry all the prisoners, except in their hearts they may carry them. You know what I'm saying? Like, you carry with you the guilt. Like, you look around and see the prisoners and you think, like, I was in charge of all this. This is all my doing. I mean, sometimes people lose their house and they get foreclosed on. Imagine losing a whole nation because you sucked. Because you were a garbage leader. Yeah, so the prisoners would, where will you leave your glory? They're looking around thinking about their glory, like, we'll go back to our kingdom. And then they look around, we don't have a kingdom to go back to. We'll go back to our families, and we look at all the slain. What families? They're all dead. Their pride is finally brought down as they look around at the reality. They see themselves led away captive. They see the bodies piled. And they finally realize, they finally bow their heads in shame. They finally bow down in defeat. They finally bow down before the Lord and acknowledge that God is in heaven. When finally, they come to this place. And for all this, his anger is not turned away, because there's more. Sorry. There's more than just this. This is not the end of it. There's just one more thing. So now we begin the new thought of verse 5. His hand is still stretched out, still ready to judge, still prepared. There's still more things that need to be judged. Prior to this, it was like, hey, his hand is stretched out still. There are those that decree unrighteous decrees. We haven't mentioned them yet. And of course, the Assyrian himself. Because the God's anger does not depart till the Assyrian himself, till his anger turns against him. Smite the rod. What does it say? Wait, that's in this passage. Let's just go. O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. Hold on a second here. I'll tell you what, hold on a second. I gotta lose this sweatshirt. It's just too hot, but I'm not gonna do it on the screen because it's just a second. All right. It was kind of cold in here this morning. It still is, but it's making me more alert to be out of the sweatshirt. All right, back to the show. All right. O Assyrian, the rod of my anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. I will send him against a hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take the spoil and to take the prey, to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Howbeit, he meaneth not so, neither doth his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. For he says, are not my princes altogether kings? Is not Calno as Karshemesh? Is not Hamath as Arpad? Is not Samaria as Damascus? As my hand hath found the kingdoms of the idols, whose graven images did excel them of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not, as I have done to Samaria and her idols, so do to Jerusalem and her idols? Verse 11. Okay, that's a good place to stop. So he calls to the Assyrian, O Assyrian, the rod of my anger. See the idea of that it's a symbolic, a rod is the symbol of correction and punishment and of rule. When Jesus comes, it says he will rule them with a rod of iron. The rod itself, when we talk about spare not the rod, it means the punishment. Right? And so he is the punishment, the rod that represents the punishment that comes from God being angry. He is the rod of his anger. And the staff in their hand is my indignation. I mean, the Assyrian has a staff in his hand, and the staff represents his rulership, his kingship, his authority. And his authority is God's indignation. God has given the Assyrian certain authority, power to do his will. And it's specifically with the execution of judgment against Israel and Judah and many nations round about them. And I will send him against a hypocritical nation. Again, let's look up hypocritical. Let's see if the same word as we encountered last time, which meant something like, I forgot what it meant in the previous chapter. I forgot what it. Sorry, I'm yawning. Did I forget to switch back already? I'm sorry. Let's see. Hypocritical nation. Against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge. Okay. Hypocritical. Oh, boy. I'm just such a bad engineer. It's hard to think of all this stuff while you're thinking of the Bible. It's hard for me anyways. You notice they add this little title here because they know it's a new thought. So, Assyrian, the rod of my hypocritical. Cheneph, just like the other day, which means profane or irreligious. A profane nation. A nation that does not honor God. A nation that's impious. Ungodly. In the New Testament, the word godly often would be, or ungodly. Honestly, this hypocritical, ungodly would be a better translation. Against the, oh, I see. I'm still got the wrong. I keep putting the wrong window up. Both windows are visible at the same time to me, and sometimes I'm just looking at one and not thinking about which one you're looking at. All right, O Assyrian, the rod of my wrath. Okay, against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge to take the spoil, to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. That's pretty brutal. It means that, their carcasses shall be torn in the midst of the streets, as it's written. For all this is anger. He's been given a charge again, just like that staff in their hand. It represents that charge, the authority. He's been given that staff, that power, that rod. He is the rod of God's anger. He has a staff in his hand. It is God's authority. He has a charge. He's going to take the spoil. He's going to be victorious. He's going to take the prey. He's going to tread the people down. I mean, there'll be dead bodies getting trampled in the streets. They just don't bother with you. Burial, who cares? And these will rot away and will be thousands of miles away. Hundreds of miles, anyways. Albeit he meaneth not so. This is not his actual intention. Meaning, his intention is not to be the servant of God. His intention is not, I will serve God's purposes. I will be the rod of God's indignation. I will be God's instrument. That's what Christians, God, make me into your instrument. Use me. We ask these things. We want God to use us because we want to be useful in the God's kingdom. We want to have our talents put to use. We want God to implement us into his church, and we want these things to be real. Right? But he doesn't think this. He doesn't think, oh, I'm going to be God's servant and blah, blah. Like this, the king of the Medes, after the Babylonian captivity, the Persians, he did think of himself as God's servant. Cyrus actually took on that role. He saw himself as the instrument of God's will because the Jews, because he was convinced because of the prophecies and such. So, it's different, but the Assyrian doesn't think so. He doesn't think of himself as God's instrument. He has it in his heart. Another thing, he means something else in his heart. He just wants to destroy and cut off nations for his own purposes. Greed or whatever, or sometimes people go to war for a lot of reasons, but it's mostly a territorial thing, meaning they're disputing about control of a territory. Meaning it could be even they don't like the way you control your territory, so you're having a war. Two states have a conflict because of a border dispute, territory. Two states have a conflict over even patents. Well, that's territory too. There's all kinds of, when you think about territory, it's control over a sector. It doesn't have to be physical territory. It could be intellectual property. It could be all kinds of things. All kinds of things people can have to fight over. It's in his heart to do this. It's in his heart to bring about the wrath itself, but not as wrath, but as his own benefit to help him. And because why? Because look, he says to himself, my princes are kings, man. I am a king of kings. It's kind of the implication, right? My princes are kings. They're not princes. They're kings. Like me. In fact, I'm unlike them. I'm a king above kings. That idea, king above kings, is, like Lord of Lords, King of Kings. It's like it's above all others. And he's seen himself as, he's exalting his underlings, and by way of that, exalting himself. Is not Calno as Carchemish, is not Hamath as Arpad, is not Samaria as Damascus. The first thing in each of this list is a location within the geography of the Levant, meaning Israel and Syria. And he looks at those areas. I know Hamath is in the north, and I believe the entering of Hamath. Whatever, I'm not a good geography guy, but you can look up these geographic locations if you want. But he's saying, like Calno is like, I took Carchemish. Won't Calno be the same? I took Arpad. Isn't Hamath going to be the same? I took Damascus. Samaria should be no problem. They're all the same. There are cities with walls. And then what? I see no difference. The armies aren't stronger. The kings are no wiser. As my hand hath found the kingdoms of the idols, whose graven images excelled, meaning they were exceeding, they were better. Jerusalem, from the perspective of God, Jerusalem is loaded with idols. But from the perspective of the heathen, it's kind of poor. It's like, the idol, you want to see real idolatry, come to Damascus. Jerusalem is just like a poor imitation. And that's the thing. That is actually indicative of a lot about Christianity that's wrong. It's funny because it reminds me of the Christian music industry, quite frankly. Because it's like they, I remember when they say, we want to have our Christian Madonna and our Christian whatever. It's like, and you're doing the same style essentially and being the same kind of thing, but Christian somehow. Even though Madonna herself is a Christian, so a lot of musicians are Christians. It's just that people don't understand how. It doesn't. You can be just as corrupt as anybody else, being a Christian doesn't make it, but that's the funny part is you have Christian bands, they'll put out music that looks squeaky clean, but they themselves are corrupt. Anyways, why does this remind me of the Christian music industry? Well, because they always want to be like the heathen. They're always trying to imitate the musical stylings of the heathen and try to imitate them. And it's this cheap imitation thing that makes me think of that. It's like, if you want to get your ungodly music, go to the radio and turn on a secular music station. If you want ungodly music, what are you going to turn on the Christian music station, and then you can hear, the same kind of music they listen, the same kind of music they're fornicating to in clubs, you can listen to, but with Jesus lyrics. Doesn't that sound wonderful? You can listen to the same music that fornicators everywhere are celebrating, and except it'll say Jesus, but it'll be the same kind of music. I've always said that not every kind of music translates into the sacred. You can't take like a circus theme, something like that, some crazy little circus tune. You're not going to take that and turn it into a song that speaks of the majesty and glory and magnificent nature of God. You're not going to create an awe-inspiring piece of inspirational music, because here's the thing, even without lyrics, music can inspire people. And that shows you that even without lyrics, music has meaning. That's why I've always asserted there is bad music. That's why a lot of times I have not been a big fan of other scripture music artists, because I don't like their music, because I feel like it doesn't fit. Like they haven't really, like a lot of times I felt like I listen to people, I'm like, you're cramming that scripture into the music. And whenever I do that, I don't like the results, and I don't like your results either. Well, that's my opinion. A lot of people do like it. I'm a bit of, a stickler. But, like I said, the idols of the heathen are better quality than ours. Christians make poor idolaters. So stop trying to imitate the heathen. Stop trying to be like them. Stop trying to have everything they have. Who cares what they have? We have the Lord, and if you have the Lord, God alone. Whoever has God wants for nothing at all, it says. Shall I not, as I've done to Samaria and her idols, so do Jerusalem and her idols? Am I not gonna? It's not gonna be the same. Of course, it's gonna be the same. There's no reason for it to be different. He thinks he does what he does because he's great, not because God made him anything. Though, as we'll see, he is not above citing the scriptures and saying, look, God has appointed me to do this. Even your prophets say so. He's not a believer, but it doesn't matter. You are. You're a believer. Look I'm fulfilling what your Bible says. I don't need to believe. It says, the staff in my hand is his indignation. Wherefore it shall come to pass that when the Lord hath performed his whole work upon Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria, and the glory of his high looks. And we looked up stout before, I thought, and I think it's the same idea. The stout. Godel. Great. Enlarged. So stout in the sense of great, meaning big, strong, that's fine. His heart has been enlarged by his own feelings of grandeur. If his heart is large, it's because he's, it's an indication, because heart can be enlarged. There are heart enlarged passages where it says, my heart is enlarged, like it swells with feelings sometimes, right? But it can also be great. And this is not heart enlarged, like that phrase that they would use, but it means his heart is great in the sense of pride, pumped up with pride. And God's saying, when it comes to pass, when I finish this work on Mount Zion and Jerusalem, because the Assyrian isn't going to be successful at Jerusalem, but he would punish the fruit of the stout heart. His heart being so prideful, if there's fruit that comes of it. You know what I mean? If he had just done God's will humbly, there'd be no punishment because he did what he was expected. But he did it in pride. He did it in, out of a lot of things. The Assyrians took a great deal of pleasure in tormenting their captives and stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of brutality and sin to account for here on the part of the Assyrian. And his stout heart, it has no place. I mean, it's like his high looks. He has high looks. He's always like thinking he is. When someone has high looks, what does that mean? It means their eyes are set on higher things. You know what I mean? Meaning they're not paying attention to the little things. You know what I mean? It's like, you're beneath my notice. I have my eyes are always upward. Oh, you? Down there? Huh. Not me. I don't deal with things down there. I'm up here. I'm looking up. Because my dealings are up here with the gods. And kings such as myself. Are there any kings up above? No. I am the big kahuna here. I am the big king. My eyes are upward. I dare not, I don't look down at the pitiful little scum beneath me. That's the idea of high looks, that they're looking at themselves highly. They think highly of themselves, and so their looks are upward. They deign not to look down at the lowly and the meek. It's an implication of pride, an implication of snobbishness too, I think. He thinks he is really the greatest thing ever, I've done it. Here, let's look at what he says. This is what he says in his heart. For he saith, by the strength of my hand I have done it, and by my wisdom, for I am prudent. And I have removed the bounds of the people, and have robbed their treasures. I have put down the inhabitants like a valiant man, and my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people. And as one gathers eggs that are left, have I gathered all the earth, and there is none that moved the wing, nor opened the mouth, or peeped. So that's what he says. Hey, I did it by my strength, not by this rod. Sure, God, the Hebrews say their God has appointed me, but and I'll use that. But what's going on here is I am strong. I've made myself strong. Who dare fight against me? Who dare resist me? Resist me and be crushed. Associate yourselves and be broken in pieces, all ye people. By my wisdom, I've been wise and prudent. They laid siege very methodically, the Assyrians. They were very prudent, very wise. They're very careful. And they're very organized. I removed the bounds of the people and robbed their treasure. I took away their boundaries, is what he's saying. I took away their boundaries, their walls, the things they used to protect themselves. I removed the protections and taken their treasures. I put down the inhabitants like a valiant man. Like a mighty man. I fought them down. I'm not just, it's not just stratagem. I've got stratagem, I've got strength, and I've got battle. I've got the heroism of the battle or whatever. I've got the battle knowledge to win without that stuff. I'm not just winning by trickery. I'm winning by the strength of my arm, by the skillfulness of my sword play or whatever. My arms. The skill of my soldiers has done it. Removing the bounds of the people. One more second. Let's do this. We'll do Vorse. Let's do Vorse 14. And we'll look at it, then we're going to comment a little further. And my hand hath found a nest, the people, riches of the people. I found the riches of the people like a nest. You ever find a nest with eggs in it? I mean, it's nothing undefended, just an empty nest with the treat, an egg. And as one gathers eggs that are left. They're just there. And that's the way the Assyrians felt like about defense cities. They were so good at sieges. It was like finding an unoccupied nest. It was like it was undefended. I just came and scooped up the eggs. That's what it was like, man. It was so easy. That's how good we are. Well, that's how I felt. The riches of the people, it was just like unguarded, undefended, scooped it out. All for me. There's none to move the wing, open her mouth, or peep. You know, an analogy to the bird. There was no bird there to defend the nest. No one peeped. No one opened the mouth. No one fluttered even a wing. No feather was ruffled. I just took it. It was like nothing. And I want to say something about this. Okay, yeah. Just as a reminder, we've been talking about the Assyrian this whole study, but I want to, as we wrap it up, I want to remind you, remember that he is a type of Antichrist, and therefore, what we're reading we can apply to Antichrist, as far as to understand Antichrist better, because he's going to move out of similar motivations, and he's going to behave in a similar fashion. Like the Antichrist, the Assyrian is motivated by pride. Like the Antichrist, he is God's tool. God sends him. The beast he's God's instrument of wrath against the people he is wrathful against. Because not just in a sense of he comes to punish them, because Jesus comes to punish, but Satan sets them. What Satan does is sets them up to be punished. He helps them bring their sins to the full. That's what part of what Satan is there for. You know, it's like, oh boy, I want to find an analogy that makes sense, but I keep coming up with things like adultery and stuff like that, and I don't know if it's a good analogy, but it's kind of like, imagine if, I'm going to skip that analogy. I was trying to think of how sometimes you want to bring things to a head. You know what I mean? Like, even pimples, when they come to a head, you can pop them. I don't know why I thought of that. But they say, it's got to be, why do they say things got to be brought to a head? Things are going to be brought to a head. Like, we have that idiom, brought to a head. We want to bring something to a head where we can deal with it. Like a pimple, we can pop it and it comes out at the head. The head is where everything's brought into one place to be dealt with, right? And so there's this desire to deal with things, to bring it to be dealt with, right? I want to get to where I was going, Paul. Come on. Oh, okay. So we have in this world, we have a lot of nominal Christians, right? A lot of people who have, and also a lot of minor sinners, not very sinful, But in order to bring about the wrath spoken of in Revelation, God will send the Antichrist, and the Antichrist will cause people to sin greatly to make them worthy of the wrath that is coming. You know what I mean? And he will help bring it to a head. You know what I mean? That the sins, like all the sins of the world until Antichrist appears, are kind of waiting. And many of them are quite awful, right? There's awful sins out in the world. There's murderers and all that, right? But there's a lot of sin that is kind of pent up. It's not really exposed. It's not really, I mean, pent up, it's hidden. It's going on, but it's not seen. A lot of it's in our hearts. A lot of Christians, nominal. A lot of Christians not faithful to the Lord, right? But they're still maybe going to church or whatever. Well, then their betrayal of Christ needs to be brought to a head. They've already betrayed Christ in their hearts. Like a lot of Christians, and I'm sorry, but I see this as a lot on the liberal side of Christianity, and I consider myself kind of a liberal Christian, though I'm a true believer and very conservative in certain ways, right? Obviously. But compared to some, I'm quite, I'm not a fundamentalist, etc., right? And that has to do, I'm going to lose my track of thought. I know what I'm talking about. Bringing it to a head. Oh. There's a lot of Christians. And there's a lot of sin that's pent up. A lot of people are... I was talking about nominal Christian, people in Christian churches and such that have not, in many ways they've betrayed Christ. They've stopped believing in him. They've rewritten the righteous standards of the Scripture. There are denominations where they are marrying men to men in the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus Christ, they are uniting people in holy matrimony, which is, just a ceremony, but the thought certainly counts. They're doing all this, but at the same time being like, yeah, we're still for Jesus. Yeah, we're still for Jesus. They're still holding up the Bible and touching it and reading it and saying, yeah, we're all for Jesus. As they do all these things. So they're rebelling. Obviously, they're rebelling against Jesus, but they don't really believe in Jesus. They want to co-opt Jesus. They want to take our religion and reform it into something that suits them, into some sort of perverse and perverted thing that accepts all kinds of sexual deviancy and immorality. That's what they want to do, is they want to change it into something like that. But they're still part of it. They want to change it from within. And so their wickedness needs to be brought to a head where it can be exposed and driven from the body like a blackhead, all right? Squeezed out. The pus come out. Because it needs to be brought all into one place and exposed for what it really is, which is anti-Christian, anti-faith. Because they don't actually believe in the Bible or in the righteous standards which God has set before us for centuries. They believe that they've now accepted that suddenly things have changed, and now suddenly these things are all okay. And like I said, I don't think it's a choice to be homosexual. I think I think they have a terrible burden. But on the other hand, it is a choice to decide to marry two of them as though they were man and woman when they're clearly not. I don't resent people their happiness, but I would rather have the state not involved in marriage, period. And then go get married in the name of Zeus. I don't care. I mean, I really don't on that level. Like, you want to go, and I really don't care on the level of the state either. Honestly, I don't care about them getting married. The question by the state, but it's the church. That's what bugs me. Churches are doing this. That's what the state doing it is a lot less concerning to me. A lot less, especially the way it happened, because it was all forced on us. It was the Supreme Court suddenly discovered that it was illegal to start. They suddenly discovered. They made a discovery. The Supreme Court did. So it's nothing to do with that. With actually someone no one passed a law. I can't blame the people for passing a law, for passing a referendum or something that made it legal. No, this was just a couple of judges decreeing an unrighteous decree and prescribing grievousness. Let's see. And then the Lord's response was, shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith? Or shall the saw magnify itself against him that shakes it and moves it back and forth? As if the rod should shake itself against him that lifts it up. Or as if the staff should lift itself up. As if it were no wood. As if it wasn't made out of wood. It was some dead thing. The staff just got up and started walking around. Lifted itself up. Cracked me on the head. Ow. Ow. The saw. I was carrying a staff around to whoop the kids. I'd never use a staff to whoop the kids. Not that I wouldn't. I just never have. He's walking around with the staff, and all of a sudden the staff just jumps out of his hand and starts bashing him on the head. You know what I mean? Shall the staff lift itself up against the one that wields it? Saying, that's the Assyrian going to turn around and bash God in the brains? Is the Assyrian going to magnify himself against God? Well, apparently. And the point is, well, isn't that silly? That's why I use these analogies. Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth with? Well, that's the stupidest thing of all. I'm such a great axe. You couldn't cut this wood without me. That's true, but I could use a different axe. Well, I could use a different owner, whatever. You're just a tool. Of course you can cut. Of course I can't cut without you. You're just a tool. And that's what he's saying to the Assyrian. You're just a tool. Antichrist also. You're just a tool. But this also, I wish I had taken more time. I'm going to take a little time to recap this. Just briefly, think about the Antichrist, Righteous decrees. Woe to Syria in the rod of my anger. Satan is the rod of his anger. He is an instrument of God's wrath. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, for he knoweth he hath but a short time. He has sinned against an impious nation, a nation that's falsely religious, like the 7 churches. The people of my wrath will I give them a charge. Well, the wrath is to come upon the ungodly in the day of wrath. There are 7 vials of wrath. To take the spoil, to take the prey. There is a spoiling of the and taking of a prey. By the beast, he conquers the world. He sets himself as the king. The whole world will worship the dragon. There is a spoiling that goes on. Of course, of the great whore herself, she is filled with the spoil, and she herself is a bit of war spoil for the Antichrist, though it's not obvious except as a subtext. To take the prey, to tread them down like the mire of the streets. There's going to be a trample. I will trample in. There will be the trampling. Well, that's more of Jesus at the end, but the Antichrist also will do his own damage, I believe. But he doesn't intend. Well, his intention is not to serve God, but to serve himself. Even the Antichrist works this way. People always say, "Well, why would Satan do what he's supposed to do? Why does the Antichrist do if he knows what God wants to do? If he knows the Bible, why does he keep doing it? Because it's what he wants to do. Even though God predicts it, it's what he can't help it. Put him in that situation. It's like a man that's filled with lust. Put him in a room with a woman who's been paid to have sex with him and to seduce him, to make sure he does it. To corrupt him, especially if he's already corrupt. Is it going to work? Yeah, you bet it's going to work. Take a man who's accustomed to prostitutes and put him in a room with a woman who's been paid. What do you think is going to happen? You know what I mean? The only person that's going to make it out of that is someone who's accustomed to righteousness, who's accustomed to saying no, who's accustomed to keeping themselves. He doesn't think so. He doesn't think that's what he's there to do. He thinks he's there to exalt himself. The princes, kings, they had on their they had crowns like gold. The locust army in chapter 9. They had crowns like gold, like they were kings. And, as not Kalna as Karshemish, he's going to find the same thing. He's going to find it easy pickings. All the world's going to wander after the beast. There's going to be no trouble. And also his target will be Jerusalem. And of course, when he finishes his work, God will punish Satan in his high looks. He's also one who is lifted with pride. There's a very close association of pride with human leaders who get out of line, who get too much power. A lot of power, too much power corrupts. By the strength of my hand, I've done it. By my wisdom, for I am prudent. He looks at all he's done and surveys it and feels very proud of himself in his accomplishment. He's taken everything and no one stopped him. And that's the thing, is when Antichrist comes, God is not going to get in the way. The 2 witnesses will give him grief. But as far as compared to what could be, but there'll be nothing to stop him. They will grieve people with their words, but there's no stopping him. And he is that axe. He is that tool. He is the rod and all those things. So, verse 16 starts talking about the punishment. He's going to send among his fat ones leanness, etc., etc. So we'll begin in verse 16 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow to continue in the book of Isaiah. Until then, have a good day. Stay in his word, etc., etc. Let's have some music. There we go.
O Assyria, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. I will send him against a hypocritical nation. Against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, the spoil, to take the prey, to tread them down like the mire of the streets. But he doesn't mean it, neither does his heart think so. But it's in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. Are not my princes altogether kings? Is not Calno as Karshemish